Hi everybody, welcome to today's session. We have our guest Shruti Khanijow. This is 𝗵𝗵𝗹𝗃 from LawSikho, and today we are talking about how to make an LLM application and how to make a good application at that. So it's a very important topic for those who have decided to apply, and for those who have not decided to apply also can benefit from it, because if you're going to apply in the future and you know the process and you know the strategies for making a good application, it will go a long way for sure. So that's the context today. So let's welcome our expert Shruti. And Shruti, I like just to know, some of you may be attending this session for the first time. If you attended the last session, you know that Shruti is somebody. Shruti is a was was working at 𝗃𝗃𝗿𝗃 as a senior associate until last month, and now she's on a different career journey. She is a Cambridge graduate, and she has earlier, been she has got several scholarships as well, and she has helped many of our students to get through to top LLMs across the world, and including Harvard, Columbia, etc., Cambridge, Oxford, everywhere, LSE. So we had a great session few days back, couple of days back, and today we are back with Shruti. We had promised that we will talk more in depth about the application process, and today we have Shruti with us to enlighten us on that. So welcome, Shruti. Thank you for joining us and making time for this.
Hi Ramanoj, hi everyone.
Hi, hi. Okay. So why don't you, like briefly share about yourself again, because there may be some new people today.
Okay, so hi guys. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Shruti, as Ramanoj mentioned. Up till recently, I was working with 𝗃𝗃𝗿𝗃. I graduated from HNLU in 2012, uh, after which I worked in Bombay for a firm for about 3 months. Then I clerked with the then Chief Justice of India for about 3 years, from where I already had gotten offers from law schools, but I deferred them for a year, and I worked with 𝗃𝗃𝗿𝗃 again for a year in disputes team. I'm basically a commercial disputes lawyer. I do different kinds of shareholders disputes, international arbitrations, contractual disputes. That's my work profile. And after working at 𝗃𝗃𝗿𝗃 for a year, I went to Cambridge to pursue my master's in international law. I'd gotten several scholarships to pursue my master's. Cambridge, as you guys, many of you would really be interested in applying to Cambridge. Cambridge is a great experience. At least it was for me. I was a part of different editorial boards. I did a lot of moots, judging moots. I was a part of Cambridge arbitration group, which was something which I was really interested in. So Cambridge more or less fit into what I really wanted to do. And my area of expertise being international arbitration, that also helped me figure out how much and what exactly I wanted to do, because Cambridge was a great place to explore, being very close to London and being one of the best institutions in the world to learn international law at. After finishing my master's degree, I went on a Cambridge scholarship to Armenia to work with high-tech startups, and that's where I worked for about 1.5 months. After which I came back and I joined 𝗃𝗃𝗿𝗃 as a senior associate. And with 2.5 years, here we are.
Great. So Shruti, you have helped a lot of people in getting through to top law schools around the world. So as we start talking, there are a lot of parts of an application process, and one part is definitely getting through the college, which is one of the hard parts, and there's other things like getting scholarships, and then there's a different parts to this. Also, there's a whole question of figuring out which college you want to go to, etc., which we covered in the last session. So today, if you can start by telling us what is the difference between a bad application and a good application. Another way to ask this is that, what do normally people do? Like, most of the applications get rejected. So what do people do wrong that their application get rejected? And what difference between the ones that get rejected and the ones which get accepted in multiple universities? Like, what is I'm guessing the difference will be in preparation, and is it a lot about the CV Is it a lot about how you are writing those applications? What matters here?
See it's a really great question, and I'll encourage the participants to write down their questions to us in their chat in case they have any more questions. But to begin with, you're right. There is a big difference between a good application and a bad application, and the question is very different from a good applicant and a bad applicant. So your application can have everything in there, and generalistically, if you're talking about, it's a it's a common conception that you need to be a topper of your class. You need to have done like 15,000 moocs. You should have published numerous articles in every year of your undergrad, so that you can, and done brilliant internships, so that you can actually get through a good law school or your masters. That's a misconception, and it's not really true. It's not that you have all of these things and your application will definitely be processed or you would be admitted. It's an absolutely wrong premise to start with. What is it if let's assume you have all of these. Now, what can go wrong? What goes wrong is you do not prepare well in advance. You don't know what to write. You've not researched the law schools well. You've made silly mistakes like a lot of people do this. A silly mistake like, let's say, grammatical errors in your SOP. That's something which is non-negotiable. Anybody reading your application and you're competing with best of the best minds, this is the last thing you want somebody to reject you on. This person did not know how to use articles well. I'll give you an example. I remember working with someone who is a brilliant person, but was very bad with timelines. Now, they did submit their application, but they forgot, and they missed out on following up with their recommender. Now, the recommenders did not submit their recommendations in time. And this affected this person's chances in getting into Harvard, Columbia, and NYU. So even if their application was great, it didn't matter because it didn't get processed, it didn't reach to. So that application is something which you would not be able to get an admission from. So per se, having worked hard, done everything right, you missed out on one part. The second part would be you are unable to tell your story and you want to fit into the box. A lot of people who speak to me tell me, oh, this person had this person has gotten through this university. I'm as great, I'm better than this person because I scored more than him, and therefore I should be able to get into these law schools. That's also another misconception. You do not really have a cookie cutter solution or a cookie cutter formula that will get you through law schools. You're your own person, and you need to identify and realize and internalize it. Your story is the one that will get you through law schools that you're interested in. Okay, that were my 2 bits. I think we're getting questions from people.
No, that's okay. So no, I have, like, before we start taking questions, let's get some of the things clear. So you are saying that people, there's a big difference between a good application and bad application. So what are these parameters on which you decide, like, how do you tell? Like, so for example, somebody comes to you and they will have an initial bad draft or an initial bad application, or they have a bad understanding of what to do. So how do you correct them? What are the few steps that you take them through so that they get better? The reason I'm asking you this is because maybe somebody can do it on their own as well. And I think one of the critical piece here is to understand what is the difference between a good application and bad application in a very good way. So one thing you have explained that, people do forget, sometimes they do a good application and they forget to follow up, etc., or recommendation doesn't come through. But let's just focus on the application itself for a moment. What do you think is the biggest issue with applications that you normally see? Where do they go wrong?
So again, there are 2 parts to it. One is the applicant is confused about what they want to do. That is a result of that leads to a bad application. Another is the applicant doesn't know how to make a good application. So what I want to do and how do I want to do it are 2 different kinds of issues that people face.
Can you explain that with some examples, please?
Okay, so let's say you study in a good law school and you see all your friends getting through big law schools for their LLM. And now you're wondering, oh, let me also go for my master's. Here, do you have a purpose to go for the master's? No. Your encouragement and your basic instinct to go for a master's degree is because everybody else is doing it. So when you start on putting down these objectives on a piece of paper and tell a potential law school why you're a great candidate to come to their law school, you've not assessed and analyzed why you want to go there.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that there will be other things apart from this, that where do people go wrong?
People go
One
wrong
is
in
that they do
selecting
not they are not explaining why they are the right fit for the university, or they are not even thinking it through. I got that part, but is that the only kind of thing, or there are other just common mistakes?
No, the common mistakes are inability to, most people don't go through the websites of the law schools themselves. So most of the application procedure and process and what they actually require from you is present on those application material. Most people don't really read what the university wants. What they do is go ahead and tell them what they want to tell the university. Now, you need to see that this is a two-way process. If I go for an interview and I keep telling them what I want to tell them and not let them interview me, it's not going to work out. Your LLM application is not a physical in-person interview. So there's nothing you can do about it. That piece of paper, that couple of documents that you send to these guys are the ones on basis on which they are going to look at you as a person. They create your persona. They know, okay, this person is great in sports, this person is great in writing, this person had these difficulties when they were a child, how they overcome them. So this is the story and your persona which you're presenting. And if you don't put it together in a way that answers their questions, it's going to be difficult for you, and that's the major failure that most people face. It's not the word limit, it's not the grammatical mistakes per se, but it's inability to write and tell them what they want to ask you.
Okay, so let's assume that I have read the website well, and I have communicated what they asked me to communicate, and I have even been able to answer it, and there are not much grammatical mistakes. The language is fine, more or less, and I'm able to explain, why the university is the right fit for me, why particularly this university, and what do I want to do in future, and all those things are aligned. So one is this, all this alignment is very important according to you. So once those alignments are in place, what else will make my application stand out?
I mean, there's obviously the content. You cannot, like I said, I think there's one more question also about the fact that I told them 3 Ps last time. What the law schools are looking for is your proven track record, your passion and purpose in pursuing the LLM, and after the LLM, what you want to do, your career path per se, and your potential. And all of these combined need to come out as a content from your application.
And what I'm trying to get at is that what makes a difference there, so there would be some good applications which meet this minimum threshold criteria. I'm sure there'll be like a large number of applications which meet this minimum threshold criteria. So what makes my chance, like if I get all this hygiene and sanitation right, after that, what is the special effect that makes me stand out and get through amazing universities? Like, what is that special sauce, if you could explain that?
That's originality and authenticity. What law schools are looking for are diversity. And how do you make a difference and impact in the world? What is it in you that makes you so special that you come and deserve a seat at their law school amongst the best of best in the world? What is it that will give them, by investing in you and giving you an opportunity at their school to do different, make a difference in the world, that will make them also be a part of that difference. Now you look at it like people on the bench in the Supreme Court, most of them went to
Sorry, I couldn't hear you on that. What?
sorry. If you look at alumni from different law schools and you go and talk about Justice 𝗰𝗿𝗏, you do mention that he went to Harvard, right? You also mentioned that Justice Chandrachud went to Harvard. Uh, it's not just that they are great people and Howard gave them that opportunity and made them. Of course, there's a part that Howard played, and I'm sure it must have been very instrumental. But eventually, Howard saw that they had a proven track record in something. So basically, Howard looked at their potential, their track record. It gave them an opportunity because they made an application and told them, this is my passion and purpose and I want to pursue it amongst the rest of the world. So now eventually Howard looked at their potential. It gave them an opportunity, and it is happy that the impact they're making is also affecting, taking their name forward. So that's the kind of approach law schools would usually have in taking international candidates. And you also need to keep in mind that the LLMs are usually targeted at international candidates. They're not usually and ideally for local domestic population.
Okay, so if you can explain this a bit, like, how is it that I mean, how can some, like, so there are people who have done good things and there are people who haven't done so many good things. So how much it matters, like your track record matters. Like you were saying earlier that, it's not only about good marks and stuff. So how can I show good track record? Like, maybe I haven't have those. I mean, maybe I've done something else. Maybe I've worked on some environmental project, or I worked on a social cause, or I have. I mean, what can I show to, one thing is I have marks and I have great academic record. I've topped in my batch or stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
that gives you a foot in the door, definitely.
yeah, but if I don't have that, then is there a way I can still at this stage do something to get into Harvard or Oxford, or am I not going to make it at all?
If you're still in law school, you can definitely do a lot. You can improve your grades. You can.
No, let's say I'm out of college.
Okay, then what are you doing currently will make a lot of difference. How are you in a position that fits you in the criteria that law school wants? And like I said, I'll go back to my point, reading what the law school wants is very important. A lot of law schools want you to have shown excellence in teaching. Now, maybe you scored bad grades, but you were a research assistant and you were a teaching assistant throughout, and now you're teaching. And you're teaching, and your students really like you, and you're doing wonders. You're writing great articles, you're getting published, you're presenting in international conferences, people are recognizing you. Now, even if you don't have really great grades, you're making up for it. You have recommendations from the top academic, names.
Can you give us some examples from your students? Like, I know the people you mentored, they have gotten through. So give us some examples, maybe live examples, which helps us to understand what kind of people get through to these places. And is it only people with, kind of topper in the class and, state football champion or something like that? Is that the only criteria, or is there a chance that a normal person can also get through to Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge?
Okay, so I think everybody is pretty normal in that sense. But let's see, let's focus. What I do is I usually work with people who've come with different and diverse backgrounds. Most of them have been your students, to be honest, or friends and family or colleagues. Everybody has their own special plus. So you need to identify what that is. For some people, that's sports. Somebody I worked with in the past, he was a national fencing champion. He did not really do well. He had very disturbed family circumstances. Now this person was diligent. He wrote a lot. So he had great publications, fencing. And when he talked about his personal story, he talked about how he overcame his personal challenges, and what every incident in his life helped him determine. So he utilized his personal story to reflect his potential and why his grades and academic performance wasn't that great, and he made it. So that was one example. Second example can be somebody who studied in government schools and did not have access to English language, but worked really hard and cleared exams to work for one of the top national universities in the country. And from there, she scored well. She did not have any publications because she had different family circumstances to get back to, but she did seller internships. She got recommendation letters from there. She got a job offer, and she moved it really well. So these things are some things that she worked on. She didn't talk about how great she did at law school. She definitely did great. That was an advantage. But she talked about how she overcame her circumstances of not being able to speak in English, to working upon herself to be able to go and become a member of an international moot team and win that moot. So that not only gave her an admission ticket, but that also gave her a lot of scholarships. So what they're looking for is you. Who are you? What is your potential? How are you able to overcome difficulties? Are you able to work in a team? If you were able to work in a team, what are the positives and negatives? Now, these things also, and when we talk about your story, we don't only talk about your SOP or your reference letters. We talk about the entire application per se. And entire application would mean these small questions about, have you done any pro bono work in the past 50 weeks? And that would mean maybe you haven't, but if you have, that's an opportunity for you to talk about it. And maybe you've done something in pro bono, and you've taught people in the neighboring village about their legal rights. You've done legal literacy. Uh, that may be your ticket to a big law school. What if you're really great at it and you've gotten national awards for it? Even if you haven't gotten national awards for it, how many lives did you impact and change? And the way you've been able to tell them, and they see that in your purpose and passion, and how that LLM is going to help you. That's also a way to go about it.
Okay, so that's great. So if you can throw some light on uh, what you just said just reminded me of two movies actually. So there's one movie called 21. It's about this guy who plays blackjack and then goes to Harvard by telling the story of what
Oh yeah.
happened in a casino. So that's one story that comes to mind. And then another, I remember seeing this when I was in college. There's a movie called The Girl Next Door, in which also they like basically they end up making some they get involved in the pornography industry and they do something. They create some videos for sexual education or something like that, and then that also helps them to get through to a college, like all this, like something different basically.
Yeah, and
So,
there is another series called Politician, and if anybody's not watched Legally Blonde, you can definitely think about it.
mhm. So basically, having a different kind of background enables you to, if you being able to tell that story effectively can help you to get through, right? Okay, great. If you now can tell us a little.
I'll just give you a personal example also. I think that will make it quite clear. For me, I've
Sure.
studied in different schools across my entire childhood. My father used to get transferred. So what I did is I utilized the fact that I've studied and I've changed cities every 2 to 3 years. How I've adjusted well, and I studied from a school, a convent school, one of the best schools in India, to a school which was run in a very small town where no transportation was also available, and it was run out of tin sheds. So that was my personal experience and my personal story, but that didn't really cover the entire time, entire scope of my story. It covered probably, let's say, 3 4 lines at best. But that is a context that made them realize how far I may have come in life and where did I begin.
Okay, so that's great. So now, if we can talk about specifically the application process, like what are the different parts of the application? I understand that there will be an application form which you may have to fill up, right? And then apart from that, I guess you would also have to submit as SOP, which is a statement of purpose, and then I think you also may have to submit recommendations. And you may need some language tests and stuff. So if you can tell us if this is more or less correct, or are there other parts of the application as well? If you can tell us about that.
Yeah, you're right, Ramanuj. I'll just like reiterate the list as well again. Yes. So there are different parts to different applications. We'll talk about the common ones, and maybe if somebody has a query, you can go to the uncommon ones as well. So usually, what they require you to give them is a statement of purpose. The number of words may vary. The content, what they want you to tell them as a statement of purpose, and how it's worded, can also vary depending on the application. That's something that you need to consider. And I'll go back to my point where I asked you to read the application really carefully, the instructions, because that's where they tell you what they want to know from you in your statement of purpose. And you should adhere to it, ideally. If not, if you want to make it more story-like instead of making it point-wise, uh, you should just ensure that you've answered their questions and then adhere to your style. And everybody has their own style of writing. Some people like to write a story, some people like to just give an essay type response to what they've asked you. And both these methods are very, very light. Then second is letters of recommendation. Usually the law schools will ask you for 2 letters of recommendation if you're still in law school, or if you've just gotten out of law school, or if you've completed 2 years of work experience or near about that. They would request you to give them 2 academic references and not professional references, because I think a lot of law schools consider that 2 years is not good enough for you to have worked with somebody and that person to have known you that closely, unless you have a good reason to tell them why this professional recommendation holds much more value than an academic recommendation. Now, if there are 2 recommendations and you work for more than 2 years, it's always recommended that you put a professional recommendation and an academic recommendation, because you worked for a long time with somebody who, or different people, even that wouldn't really matter, because you've been out of law school for a while. So a professional recommendation will come to your aid. Your application, and that also goes in hand with the fact that your SOP or your application will contain the fact that you worked for these many years. How does that fit in with your proven track record part? And how does it reflect your potential, passion, and purpose? So this will be an essential part of tying in your SOP and your recommendations. Now, what your recommendations contain cannot be divorced from what your statement of purpose contains. it shouldn't be that you're talking about, oh, I want to do international, human rights law. But right now I'm a commercial lawyer, and I love doing this thing. And when I come back to India, this is what I'll do again. Now can't be wanting to read international human rights. You want to do internships in international human rights. You've never really studied it. You have no background in it. You've not done MOOCs. You've not done any publications in it. You've never really worked in it. Your internships were absolutely divorced from it. But this is an essential part of your application, and nowhere in your recommendations also it's mentioned. So that's something which is a disharmony between applications. That will be a big problem and a loophole. Now, coming back to the third part of your applications, a lot of them require you to submit a CV. I think most of them would, unless the system would change drastically. Now, that CV again can't be something that where you put in everything that you've done from class 10. No, your stories are very different from your CV. Your CV needs to be clear, to the point, very academically oriented, talking about why is it that you want to go for an LLM, what have you done in the past, and what makes you a good LLM candidate. That's what they require you from your CV.
I also
And
think that a story, tell me if this is correct, that, a CV, I'm talking generally, not only for LLM applications, that a CV should also like show some kind of career trajectory and growth, and not like a random combination of stuff. So,
I
if you,
agree.
so it should show like it's kind of your, your CV projects you in some way, that who are you? It tells a story as to, like, it gives a person an idea as to what are your interests. And it seems that you don't have any interest, or you have all disparate crazy interests which are completely disconnected with each other. Then it might put you in a difficult spot. So if you're applying for, let's say, a specialized LLM of some sort, then it would be great if you show why that specialization is important. If you're applying for, say, IP law.
I agree, but there are two views to it. For example, if my application per se, I'll take my personal example. I've done a different load of things, and that's because this is the kind of person I am. I like to do different things, explore, then finally put my hand onto, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. But whatever I did a mix of everything. I did really well in whatever I did. So that was my pitch point in my CV, and that's one of the basic reasons I actually went back from a good lucrative law firm job in my first 3 months to a clerkship, because I realized I wanted to do disputes. I was very clear about that. And second, I was very clear about the fact that I wanted to explore what exactly the world has in the world in terms of pure litigation, pure law, before I venture into anything else. So that was my pitch. My pitch was, I've done everything else. I've done really great at everything I've done. Now I'm clerking, and I'm also exploring things that I really like to do. While I'm clerking, I've also explored these things, but I have my heart set on international arbitration. Why? Because I've done these moots in my past. I've done these international publications in the past. So a place in your university will give me an opportunity to explore and extend and have a better career perspective when I apply for the jobs in job market and international arbitration. So I compensated for it.
Got it. If you can tell a little bit about, uh, how you have to change your application according to the university or the program you're applying for, and what to look into that. Like, for example, do you look at the professors, faculty? Do you look at their track record? What do you look at? How do you decide? So basically, my application for Harvard and Yale has to be completely different from what you're saying. So how is it going to be so different, and uh, how do you deal with this? If you can explain that.
See, the basic premise of what our conversation today is, you remain you. You have to first figure out what have you done in the past, what reflects your potential, and then marry it what the university wants you to tell them. Where does your story fit into their perfect candidate story?
Can you give some examples for that?
Okay, let's say that we go back to the example of you've done a lot of teaching assignments. You've taught in different you've been a research assistant while you were at law school. You're teaching now, and at your law school you were also great at public service work. You assisted a lot of lawyers during your internships in doing pro bono matters. Now your passion, and now your passion is something which is teaching, which is also a part of public service. and you like doing public interest work. Let's say you apply to Yale, they're very academically inclined. Your front pitch is teaching, getting back to academics, research. Maybe you can marry the fact that you want to do public interest research, you want to establish centers in your law school when you come back to India. So that can be your pitch for Yale. But when you apply to, let's say, a law school where a specialized LLM is present in public law, or let's say the area of law that you teach in your law school, you will modulate your essay according to the fact that this is what you teach right now. You want this specific coursework to go into your application. How will you improve your law in the pure law field there? Uh, and similar facts.
Okay, so I understand that sometimes people do not have a very clear thing that what they want to do, but they just want to get into a very good university. So, and it's fine enough if they don't know, right? So they might be open to being a diplomat and a law professor and a law firm partner all at the same time. So
Yeah, and then the fact is everybody is alive to it.
right.
The
So
people
when you
reading
are
your
applying to
application also know
Harvard,
that it's not hard and fast. If you tell them that I want to teach for the rest of my life, and at the LLM you end up getting a job at one of the big law firms, and then you say bye-bye to your teaching career, nobody's going to hold that against you. So the point is, at the time of making your application, what is the reality that you want to write about?
yeah, but does it make sense that say I'm applying to one university and I'm saying something that this is what I want to do, and then I know that there's a different university where different kind of environment exists, so I write something else. Does that make sense?
I mean, it perfectly makes sense to me if, as long as somebody knows what they're saying and what they're doing. Most people end up thinking that I'll apply to this school, I'll say that I'm going to teach. And then I'll apply to this school and I'll say I'm going to come back to my country and do commercial litigation. But what they end up doing is they end up making a really bad medley of everything, which makes no logical sense. So, different applications may have different requirements and will require you to do different things, which is a reality. But you need to be clear logically as to what you're saying and why you're saying it. It should make sense to the other person to read. Your object can be very different. You might want to teach at this stage of the career. I mean, I'm sure you're out of law school for about 11 years now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
No,
10 years. Yeah,
9 years.
yeah 11 years. Maybe
9 years.
9 years. Yeah,
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 1 year.
11. Yeah. Mm.
9 years. And yeah, so I'm 8 years out of law school, but I mean, that my career can take different turns and trajectories. I might not want to be at a law firm for long term. I might want to do different kind of litigation. I might want to like jump in and do no litigation at all and start doing pro bono work
Okay.
or startup. So your journey needs to like tell you what you want to do eventually. And everybody is alive to the fact you may not want to teach for the rest of your life. You may not want to litigate for the rest of your life. You may not want to do corporate lawyer like work for the rest of your life. You may not want to be specialized in capital markets. You might want to do taxes.
No, I get that. But say, for example, the other day you're saying that if you apply to Yale, then
Mm-hmm.
if you say that I want to work in a law firm, then you're most unlikely to get, because the
Yeah.
kind of people who go to Yale are like, government people who work
So
in the
it's not about
government,
kind of
public
people.
service.
It's not about kind of people. It's about what they want. If you go to their website, they specifically tell you if you want to go join a law firm, then this is not. That said, it's not that people who want to go work for lawyers don't go to Yale. They
Yeah.
obviously tell them what their teaching expectations. So you need
So
to go
then,
to.
then if you're applying to Yale, you have to say, no, I'm interested in doing public service or work with government policy and stuff.
Yeah. What do they want to know from you? If they want to know from you that this is the area of my interest and this is my future career path that I want to improve at, and take a stepping stone there, then you've got to tell them something which you know that they're not actually open to. If they're not open to it at all, then you're just wasting your application money and time.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
have to read where you want to apply. That's also very, very important. If you don't want to
So
apply
can
there,
you give some examples of
I'm
universities?
sorry. I'm just going to take this opportunity to clarify one thing.
Uh-huh.
LLM, most people assume is a golden ticket. It's not. It's a stepping stone to what you want to do next in your life. Does it fit into your personal agenda and objective? It can be anything. It can be the fact that I want to live abroad for an year. It can be the fact that, oh, I'm not ready to join the workforce this year. I want to study more.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that, everybody in my family goes there. So I need to go to that law school because it's a thing. So it can just be anything. It need not be really something that you've thought through in the sense of, okay, I want to teach for the rest of my life. No.
Right. So we are getting some questions you have already answered before. We cannot answer the same questions in every session. So we had a long session last time, 1.5 hours, answering these questions like, whether to do masters immediately or after some years, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So I'll stick to the application questions related to. If you guys have any questions related to application, please post here. We'll answer them, but we'll not answer general questions or LLM today. Only we'll stick to questions related to application process, how to make a great application and get accepted in like top universities around the world. That is the focus. Okay, you're not going to talk about whether to do LLM or not, whether to do it immediately or after some years, etc. There are many questions possible. I see many questions which are like general, so not today. Okay, and we'll share those videos that we have done before on our YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 YouTube channel and get access to it. Okay. So, Shruti, before you're saying this, I wanted to ask you this question, Father, that, what are some universities that are known, like you said, for Yale, this is very specific. So are there other universities like that which are very specific, bent of or area of interest and targeting a certain kind of people only?
Most universities have different kind of LLM programs. For example, at Stanford, there are 4 streams of the LLM. There's nothing called general LLM. So when you're applying for those streams, you need to keep that in mind. Now, you can't tell them that I want to do something in corporate governance or technology. But what I've done for my entire life is public interest litigation, and I only want to do public interest litigation. That to say land acquisition litigation, it doesn't fit into their purpose unless you justify that why land acquisition litigation is so important and so inherently connected to corporate governance or technology laws. Maybe you want to build a platform, maybe you want to do something which is changing the country and landscape, and you want to contribute in some way, and you've already done something. Unless that's clear from your application, it's a wrong shot to take.
Got it.
And you're setting yourself up for failure.
Okay, so are there universities which are very well known for, let's say, international commercial arbitration and let's say IP law and technology law, corporate law? Are there like such out of the top 10, top 15 universities around the world? Are there such other universities? Like you said, Yale is known for public policy governance kind of things. Are there other ones?
Let's say there are different Geneva is known for its arbitration course. 𝗰𝗵𝗍𝗶 is really good arbitration course. So most of the universities have are universities which have all streams, and most of these and in those streams the specializations exist. For example, one of the reasons I went to Cambridge was because it has a great international law faculty. It has Autopac Center, which is one of the best in the world, actually the best in the world. And the courses they offer were very, very interesting. Something that I also wanted to do. I wanted to do international commercial litigation and international quality and international commercial litigation teaching that course. So that worked out for me. When you talk about law of restitution, uh, and at the time I was there, and I wanted my degree in international law. So I chose Cambridge. I curated my courses accordingly. It's the same with Columbia also. They have great professors for arbitration. It's based out of New York, which is also a hub for international arbitration. I mean, the city firms are always there. Then New York also has a great international law faculty. They have a specialized program in international law. There is international economic and business laws course at Stanford, which is also good. If you want to do IPR also is great at, I think, Berkeley and Stanford. Then when we can talk about corporate governance is really good at Stanford and I think Columbia as well. Harvard, I'm not too aware of what's a good course to take at Harvard because their arbitration faculty is good. Their constitutional law faculties are good. The negotiation courses are very, very good, something that I was interested in. So I've personally not done a research in what courses are best. I think we've lost. That's something which depends on a person's interest. You need to figure out what you want to do. Is it, if you're choosing a university, is it out of the love for law that you want to go and read there? Is it because the prestige of the university is much more important to you? And suppose you get through 3 of your top choices, let's say Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, and now you have to choose. You will probably think about what courses you want to go for, what kind of life do you want to live there. Okay, everyone, we can continue with the questions. Is there any question that I should answer now? Okay, the best colleges to do an LLM in US, I think corporate or commercial law, it'll depend on what you want to do. It'll depend on what you want to do there. For corporate and commercial laws, I think it's very important to consider where you're going to study. I think good courses are available at Columbia, at Stanford, and so for corporate and commercial laws, yes, you have to figure out what is the best course for you, what is the best opportunity for you there. Are you looking for a job after doing your masters? Is that a jurisdiction in the USA where you'll qualify for writing the bar exam after you do your masters from there? So these are some considerations that you could look at. Okay, next question is do's and don'ts for the second year law student to increase their chances. Do's are definitely work hard on your academics, definitely score well. Ensure that you're doing what you really like. I think there's no cookie that if you do, let's say if you write 15 or 100 articles and you definitely get to know that that's really not the solution. The point is to stay and do whatever you want to do. If you find, let's say, corporate laws interesting, please definitely write on it. Ensure that you show during your next 4 years of law school what you really like to do. From my own personal experience, I think doing different things in law school really helps you. It also helps you understand if you want to do an LLM at all. And if you want to do an LLM, what do you want that LLM to be in? Because most of us forget that writing an LLM, applying for it is a one part. When you go there, you actually have to sit down and study. And those studies mean subjects. If you remember in law school, love some subjects and you'd really like some subjects. So LLM is your opportunity to really love those subjects and read them in detail. Now, I'm going to take, I hope that answers your question. There's another question from Mithali about general LLM with equal chances of bagging a job as compared to a specialized LLM. Now, see, the specialized LLM means those guys are going to curate courses for you. You go for that LLM and you read those courses ideally. Now, with the general LLM, you have the opportunity of reading the same kind of courses, but maybe mix it up a little. When you go for a job interview, it depends on what kind of jobs are you looking at. If you're looking at a starter level position, let's say if I'm going to take an example of the UK has training contracts, or in the US, you begin as a A0, I think L1 or something. I don't remember I'm not too sure of the term there. But if you're looking for a entry level position, it will not matter what you've read as such, as much as what skills do you have, what have you acquired. So if you're applying for a job in corporate, let's say a law firm in a corporate law stream, and you've not read US corporate laws, it may be difficult for them to recruit you immediately for US corporate law work unless you have cleared the bar or you have a clear reason to tell them why you'd be a good fit. Another thing that you should keep in mind is when you're applying for law firm jobs, you may just be applying for a very specialized job profile for an Indian lawyer, Indian qualified lawyer. So as long as you've done the relevant work in India and you've studied something there which reflects, okay, you're interested in doing that thing for the rest of your life, maybe that's a good way to also go about it. Then next is, when should we ideally start preparing? If you're starting, there's nothing called prepare. Like I said, it's something called your story. So whatever you do on your way, it's very important to ensure that you do it really well and you're able to project your strengths and weaknesses accordingly in your application. So when you talk about preparation would mean getting good grades, ensuring that you do good internships, you reflect the potential that you have in a very positive way and make a good story for yourself. Like, think about it. If you're reading your story after 5 years, what would you want to have done? And do those things in those remaining 4 years that you have. Another question is, what is the recommended university for pursuing technology law? I think I'm going to not take these questions. I'm happy to take these questions on my email personally, because the current topic is how to make a good LLM application. Now, There's Jalaj, who has 5 years of experience in M&A and real estate and wants to continue to work in M&A and is an associate at Luthra. Okay, sorry, this is not something which I can figure. Sorry, Jalaj, can you please tell us your question again in complete form?
Okay, good. So I think that is great. Like, if you want to cover anything about application process, I think there'll be a lot of questions about USA everything. But I mean, you can answer them. You can share your phone number to answer them personally if you like. Yeah, Shruti, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So why don't you share your details in whichever way you prefer to be communicated with? So last time we had shared your phone number and your Instagram, so you can share that this time as well, or maybe email also. So if there are any questions other than application process, that gets covered. So for today, let's talk about more about the application process.
Okay.
And
questions, are there specific questions that you would like me to answer?
Yeah, sure. If you can talk a little more about recommendations, that'll be great. Like if you can talk about, for example, generally, yes, there are, your college professors and your work people, I mean, work bosses. But other than that, are there any specific things about them? Because there'll be so many of them, right? So which ones to go for?
Yes. So ideally, if you're a law student, I think I've covered it. I'm not sure if you were around. If you're a law student and then you were applying for your master's, let's say in your 5th year, then it's ideal that you take it from people who you worked with. Ideally, that will be your professors and not your internships, because internships are too short term for anybody to really tell the law school about what they're asking.
So what I'm asking is that, yes, there are so many professors, right? There are you would have worked.
I got your question.
So similarly with, even if you have worked with bosses, there are so many seniors you've worked with. So which one should you be really targeting? Like just the guy you're reporting to, or I think sometimes it may be better to go for certain professors over others, right? Is it like that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So let's say you read at law school. If you're in a 5-year law school, you must have read different subjects, 5 and 2, which come out to like a lot of subjects in a year. In 5 years, at least, it becomes too much. So you need to pick out which is a professor who's taught you for the longest time, who can talk about your different skills, including, let's say, you scored really well in insurance law, and this person was your warden, and now this person is also a VC of another law school. He wasn't a person who is, but this person is now no more attached to the law school. This person, however, taught you really well, knows you really well, has seen you develop and grow over the past couple of years. So yes, that person will be a good person to take a recommendation from. One thing that you should also consider is to see that if you can find somebody who's an alumni of the university where you want to apply, an alumni's recommendation will definitely have some better bearing, because like if I went to Cambridge, if somebody asked me for my recommendation to go to Cambridge, I'll be really happy to write it, and maybe they'll also be happy for the fact that somebody from their Cambridge, I mean, not right now, obviously, their Cambridge alumni pool is sending another person who they think is a great asset and a great potential. So that may help. Somebody who is academically proven themselves. A lot of questions really came to me about do we need a high-profile recommendation like a Supreme Court judge? A recommendation with really bad grades is not going to help you. A recommendation with no profile, no story, a really bad application is also not going to help you. What a recommendation helps you is the fact that you've been able to operate at a good, challenging level. With great, recommenders comes the fact that they've worked with you. And if they've become that well and achieved something in their life, that means they know how to assess a person. And the work that you've done with them should also have been that high quality. So that's where it comes from. So a recommendation from a Supreme Court judge means nothing more than the fact that somebody at that level worked with you and recommended you. If you probably are great at your work, you've studied really well, you were the recommendation size law firm partner, that's good enough.
I think there's a very specific question by Bharat which you may want to take. had a couple of questions. He's asking how much pertinence do marks in your university examination hold in the application, especially in Oxbridge and Harvard? For example, if Mr. A is in the top 5% of the class, but not secured a rank in the university merit list, are there any chances of he still getting into Oxford? Is a clerkship at the Supreme Court, High Court a real value addition to your application if you're interested to come back and litigate in India?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question. Oxbridge and Harvard. I think Cambridge and Harvard are not too highly stuck with the fact that you need to be in the top, let's say 2 or 3% of your class. Whereas Oxford, I think it's very, very challenging to get in terms of a BCL if you're not in the top percent of your class, unless you have substantial years of experience. And by substantial, I mean those years of experience can be even 5. Depending on what you prove in those 5 years. If you're in, let's say, his specific question, if you're not in top 5%, if you're in top 5% but did not secure a rank in the university merit list, but in your application otherwise shows that you're stellar, you still hold a good chance. At least at, like, I think Cambridge and Harvard, and they go beyond your scores most of the time. But that's it. You can't really not have done anything academically and expect yourself to get an admission. That's not going to really help. Top law schools means it's not just you, it's everybody else also applying there, and everybody else who's applying with you, your competition. They definitely do have great grades or have a name in university merit list. So it's not about your great story going there, it's about you comparing with them also. It's always good to have better marks.
So one question here is that if somebody has like whatever grade they may be having, can they make up for it by, for example, writing and publishing books, or writing great journals, or blogging, or
definitely,
or social work, etc.
Yeah, anything else, it shows application of mind, it shows initiative, it shows the fact that you were interested and engaged, and you're an active participant in writing your own story and bringing yourself more success.
Yeah, so you have done something interesting, right? So that matters.
Yeah, what is it? Think about it. You're going out on a for an interview or a dinner with somebody else. Now, if that person's boring, are you even interested in talking to them? No. Right? If your application is boring, and it says I've done X, Y, Z, and when I ask you to tell me your story, you really have nothing else. Oh, I went to school, I studied, I came back, I wrote exams. Nobody cares. I mean, you're not interesting enough.
And from that perspective, how much does clerkship with a Supreme Court or High Court judge help in your application?
It definitely has its own star value. Like I explained, those people have achieved something in life. Their word really matters. But having done an
even if they're not giving any recommendation, just as sometimes you do this, what do you call? You only get to do the clerkship. The judge doesn't write your recommendations. It's pretty common.
That's happened to a lot of people I know. I mean, especially people I've worked with also. This has happened, but you don't really need a recommendation. What clerkship helps you with is it helps you figure out what you want to do, what you did there. For example, at the time I was clerking, there were a lot of death penalty cases that I worked on. And I hadn't done something like that earlier, and I haven't done it after. But it gave me good exposure, gave me good experience. It also helped me understand what are the nuances. So a part of my application was that I worked on death penalty cases. This is how it shaped my thinking. This is how it ensured that I figured out how human lives are important, and my views on death penalty changed. This is the first time I realized how views are important in terms of framing the law and drafting it, and how I utilize that experience to ensure that my practice in commercial law or contract law benefits. So that's also a part of clerkships. I mean, clerkships give you good experience because there's a lot of cases that judges deal with. It's a lot of pressure. If you're in good terms with the judge and the judge trusts you with your work, you'll get great research experience. You'll get good courtroom exposure. You'll also get to work and probably, if you're really lucky, draft judgments.
Okay, so I think we have come towards the end of our conversation. Few more questions. Okay, Varad has few more questions. He'll get in touch with you. So one last question before we go, like, how long does it really take, and what is the process? How much effort or time it really takes in your experience when somebody does a great application? Like, I mean, you are actually showing me a plan. Would you like to show it? You can share your screen and maybe showcase that. I mean, I found it really interesting.
Yeah, okay, let me check.
Yeah.
Will
So
you give me a
how
moment?
you're saying that people actually, you make your students actually sit down and create an Excel sheet of their strengths and weaknesses and map it out as to how they're going to use that for application process. I think if you just give them a glimpse of it, it could be very beneficial for many people.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm just doing. Okay, is that visible?
Yeah, screen sharing. Yeah,
Great.
it's visible. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
That's something that we worked about last time.
Okay, so maybe you can explain this. This is a framework you use for your students, right? Couple of pages. So if you can explain what is being done here.
Yeah, it's basically a work in progress, really. What I've seen is, for me personally, these things really work well, and they've worked well for everybody else who I've worked with. Uh, when I talk about spreadsheet your story, I mean, a lot of us have a lot of things in our mind. When we sit down and we start writing, it just gets mixed up. So it's a easier way to write down what are your strengths. And by strengths, I don't mean that I can write 5,000 words in a day. I mean, that's definitely a strength. But the strength would be that I'm hardworking, dedicated, and I can produce good results in a very short time.
Okay. Okay.
Or
Okay. So do you, I mean, I'm not sure you're prepared for this, but maybe sometimes you can show us a spreadsheet, what it looks like. That will also help people. But if you can explain the rest of this, like, getting down to business, spreadsheet, the law school's requirements and deadlines.
Okay, let me just run through it quickly. If anybody has specific questions, they can definitely reach out to me.
Sure.
What I'd also suggested, what we'd also spoken about, I think, just before this webinar, Ramanuj, is we could create a Google Doc and ask people to send us questions, and we can categorize them before we have a call or a webinar.
Sure. Yeah.
So when I talk about SWOT analysis, I talk about what are the strengths of your profile, what are your weaknesses. Weaknesses would mean that you've not been able to score well in a semester, or your grades are too low. So that's a weakness of your profile. So it's a very realistic assessment, and you have to be very honest to yourself. It can't be that, oh, I'm really smart and great, and the lack of my marks are not my weakness. No, uh, less marks are your weakness, and it's not your weakness, it's the weakness of your profile. It might not reflect who you are, but it only reflects of what you don't have, what you need to compensate on in your story to ensure that you explore and specifically explain what your potential is. The 3 P's, I think one of the people also mentioned it. I put it 4 P's because I think passion and purpose are, I personally think passion and purpose are the same, but they may be different for you. So let's leave that room here. When we talk about proven track record, your story reflects what exactly is your track record in terms of academics, in terms of what you've done. Have you been a leader? How impactful have you been? What circumstances have you overcome? And things related to that, which show that this is how excellent I am, this is my excellence, and this is who I am. Your passion and purpose is something that you've done and it shows in your previous work. Uh, and it also should show what you want to do in the rest for the time that you want to spend in this career for the next few couple of years at least. And your future potential is something which comes out, and it comes out hand in hand from your proven track record, passion, and purpose. It can't be divorced from that. So that's something which you need to tell them very clearly, in a very subtle way, but very clear. There's no room for confusion. When I talk about getting onto business, spreadsheeting the law school's requirements and deadlines, it's more about housekeeping more than anything else. When you spreadsheet the requirements from every single law school's website, talking about what do they want, you're actually helping yourself answer these questions when you sit down to write. The next is the deadlines. Deadlines are very important, and the requirements also. If you require to take an English language test in advance, which I think Yale requires you to take in advance of the application, you should have done it, and you shouldn't wait for the last minute to register, because it really hampers your own application. Suppose you've done everything, and I know of people who've done it. They've done really well in their applications, but somehow they forget to do their English language tests, and that's quite sad. So the next is the process of draft, redraft, review, finalize, revise, and compile. So most of us don't really know at the first instance what we're going to write as the final product. We might want to change our mind. We're probably a redrafter. And putting it down and giving yourself some time to analyze, think about what my story looks like. Maybe I want to change it completely. Maybe I have 5 different versions of my story. So that timeline gives you and helps you. It also helps you to figure out how do you reflect your story in different parts of your application. Okay, this is something that I want to that I want to put in my SOP. This is something that I want to put in my recommendation letter, because recommendation letter is also a part of who you are, and it's also going to be read by the application reviewers. So it also projects some part of it, and that helps you and leaves you room to ensure there's no repetition. If there is, then it's less. What are the parts that I want to put on my CV? What are the things that I want to eliminate from other parts of my application? For example, your application may ask, have you done a research project in the past 5 years? Your research project can be a part of your SOP, but the fact that that application provides you a specific column for 200 words about writing it, you don't really need to mention it in your SOP, because that part will give you enough to write about. And most of us, when we are drafting, redrafting, we'll keep that in mind. Maybe we forgot it at the time we were drafting. When we were looking at the application, we realized, oh, this place has place for my research questions. And that's where I'll put it. So I'll eliminate it from my SOP. So placement can really help you in that sense. I think that's about it. For letters of recommendation, all these questions are very, very clear. I think how many LORs are mandatory, who should be your recommender, we've already answered that. What do they want the recommenders to write? That's also available as a pointer. You'll see on the websites. And you may want to stick to that and fit into your story. Answer the questions, and I'll again put emphasis on, and I can't put more emphasis on it.
If you can give some timelines, like, how long does it take to do draft, redraft, and all the review process and everything?
So I think everybody's potentials are very different. If you're working, you also, when you talk about strengths and weaknesses, you will also realize something about yourself. You'll realize that you're a person who works on stretched deadlines, somebody who works under pressure. But I will not recommend under pressure, because it usually does not work out. You'll end up making grammatical mistakes. You'll probably not be coherent in your application. So that's something which you don't want to do if you're actually spending so much time, energy, and efficiency in making applications.
I think the most problem is that most people face is that they spend a lot of time thinking about it, but they don't spend enough time writing, drafting strategically. Rather, it's all in the head, and most of the time, bringing the whole process together, it's quite hard for a lot of people. I think people struggle with that. Is that the case in your experience?
Oh yes, definitely. And most importantly, it's worse for people who are working professionals. I mean, having worked at a law firm, and when I was applying, I was also a working professional. It was very difficult for me. I mean, sleep time, work time, and application time are really important. So like I said, preparation, action, and results, there are 3 different things. You need to prepare first, make up your mind, and then you take actions.
What is your sense if there are a lot of people who try to do it last moment, like on the last day they just draft an application and send, which I think is okay if you have applied to multiple places already and you are so conversant with it. At some point it may become like you applied 10 times already.
About my Cambridge application, I made it in 6 hours.
But I don't think that would be recommended for somebody who's applying for the first time or second time, because this is what your second year, from what I understand, right?
No, when I applied personally, I applied it was in 6 hours under pressure, because I did not have time otherwise in my life to apply.
Okay, I understand. But
so when I look back at
do you recommend that to your students?
No, I wouldn't recommend it to myself. I mean, I could have made a definitely better application. I got through, I got good grades, etc. But that's because I had requisites which were like also required. I had done everything, and Cambridge application requires you to put things in very crisp, logical manner. So I think I was able to, my strengths in my understanding is logic. So I was able to coherently put it across, and I had 6 hours stretch clear. So that helped me. But for my other applications and law schools that I got through, I gave them enough and sufficient time, and I got really
What
good.
kind of timeline do you expect your students to spend on an application on an average?
Definitely give it more time, in the sense
What kind of time?
I
10 hours, 12 hours?
I prepared really well earlier. I knew what my strengths and weaknesses are. So I was at stage, let's say, 3 on action part when I applied. Most people aren't here. So most people are at stage preparation 1. So if you're at stage preparation 1 and you're not sure where you want to apply, how you want to apply, you don't even know how the portals work, it's not going to work out for you. It worked out for me specifically because I knew all of this. So it wasn't that big an issue. If I didn't know, it would have been for me.
So, in your experience, what is the time that somebody should set aside for applying to, let's say, Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge? How much time should one set aside?
I think every week you need, so you should start ideally in August. Your preparation should start in August.
Okay, but there are 2 different batches to apply in, right?
Sorry, no.
Only once a year.
Yeah, once a year. I think there are some universities which have rolling admissions, but I've not worked with anyone or personally applied to any law school which has rolling admissions or rolling applications.
So you start in August, and then what? Like how much
The
time?
applications usually open by September or October first week. The first step is to understand what do you want to do. See what courses and what universities are in your priority list. Then accordingly go and read their websites. Then see what is required for the application. Look at your CV and you see, does my CV help me get through this law school? That's some assessment that you have to do. Write down a bare structure of what is your story, what are the 5 basic things that you can tell somebody reading your application. What are the things that make you stand out? For example, in the second year, you headed the pro bono cell of your law school. These are the changes you made. You set up a specific.
Okay, but how much time? I'm just trying to understand my timelines. In August, I start. Okay.
I'm sorry, I digressed. Yes, if you start in August, you give about 2 hours, depending on how efficient you are, every week to understand. By September, you should have made up your mind about what law school do you want to go to and what law school, what specific course do you want to apply to. September, when the deadlines start, you see what are the requirements and you start fulfilling them as soon as possible. Identify your recommenders. So September is identifying and writing.
How much time? How much time in September?
Again, it depends on somebody's efficiency, but I'll suggest keeping at least 20 hours aside.
20 hours for one application.
Yes, your first application is the most difficult one. Because that's where you're also.
No, but of course, if I apply to 5 or 10 different places, it would be a very different time requirement.
Yeah, it'll at least be 35 hours. If I'm saying 20 now, it'll be 35 because you'll also need to go through the university websites and see what are the different.
For how many universities? I'm not clear on the numbers at all.
Sorry?
I'm not getting clear on the numbers at all, Shruti. If you can just tell me, like, 5 university, 10 university.
Okay, if you're applying to 5 universities and you're also targeting applying to the scholarships that are underlying, you definitely need to keep aside 35 hours or 240 hours in September.
In September, okay. And
yes,
then after
and
that,
when I say 35 to 40 hours, you need to do your first drafts for everything.
Okay, this is only the first draft for 30-40 hours.
Yeah, doing your preparation, understanding, figuring out who your recommenders are, doing first drafts. In October, you should be able to have taken some reviews on your first drafts, revised them, reviewed them on your own, sent out your recommendation letters, drafts, if that's what your professors want. In India, at least professors require you to send a draft to them, or even your professional recommenders. I've only seen very few write their own from scratch. Most of them would like for you to give them your pointers.
Yes.
Or to tell them what is it that you want them to write. Some would want you to give them a first draft and they'll accordingly change it.
So all of that will take another 20 hours or so, I am guessing.
It's taxing. It takes a lot of time, at least 40. Keep that aside because October
October is another 40 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, November.
Then after that, I think most of your good big law schools applications are done, except Oxford and Columbia and New York is also a little later. For those applications, you may take time in writing the specific essays for scholarships, because Columbia has different scholarships, NYU has different scholarships, and Oxford also requires you to write a legal essay. Like Harvard has a 500 to I think 750 word requirement to write a legal essay. So these things are going to take you time as well to understand.
So another 30 hours or so, maybe.
Yeah.
So basically, from August till
Keep aside at least 100
November.
hours. 100 hours.
No, not 100. From what you have told us, it's basically around 1 hour initially, and then basically 1 hour a day. If I leave out the weekends, 1 hour a day, and then 2 hours a day every day for next 2 months, and then finally, like next 3 months. August maybe 1 hour a day, and September, October, November around 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours a day.
Okay, I personally don't recommend spending too much time in September.
But if you're spending, let's say, 40 hours in September, then that is 20 days. If you take, like, leaving aside the weekends, that leaves you with 20 into 40 hours. So every day around 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's quite taxing, and it's a big timeline, right? So starting to beginning, like you are investing around, I think, 130 hours or so throughout to apply to 5-6 universities and scholarship.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's not where the work ends. The work also begins when your applications are shortlisted, and you also have to apply to other scholarships. Then the cycle starts again.
Okay.
But the good part is you don't have to start from scratch. Then you already have your base material. You just have to tie it in together well. But all scholarships, specifically independent scholarships, have different stages which are quite grueling, and interviews are also very, very challenging.
Yeah, I see where the challenge is here, because if I am going to struggle, I mean, if I honestly had to spend 100 hours or 120 hours working on applications, I'm highly likely to get distracted. I'm highly likely to not do the hard work and the required groundwork. Discipline would be an issue with many people.
And a lot of people would get discouraged about the fact that they're writing about themselves. A lot of us are very critical about ourselves, and we have what's called an imposter syndrome. We might be like, oh, I scored really well in this subject, but what the hell, other people got like 5 marks less than me. So good enough. I highlight this. So I think a lot of people suffer with that. So it's always good to have an external view. It can be anybody who knows you, who doesn't know you, who's been to that law school. That's something that you need to keep in mind. I mean, don't be.
Right, so you need to get somebody to review your application.
Some people think, oh, I've done this and this is great. This will get me through. And truth be told, it may not be that thing. And they get disheartened, and the application results come, but the reason is because you overassessed your strengths. You underplayed your strengths, or you overplayed your weaknesses. So something which makes you a better candidate can also come in when you have somebody review, and it can be anybody.
I think you can stop sharing the screen then, if you're done with this document. Okay, so this is very useful, Shruti. Like, I think I got a lot of clarity, especially towards the end of this session, when I got a very clear picture of how much work goes into doing even 5 top university LLM applications. And I think that's quite eye-opening about the amount of work that goes in. And I would think that if somebody properly puts in those 100 hours in a disciplined way, then that would definitely make a huge difference to the quality of applications. But I see the problem that, for me at least, the problem would be to actually make time on a regular basis and invest myself and work systematically in a disciplined manner towards something. So, I'll just give this example that most of us in college, for example, knew that if we study a subject, we will score really good marks. We knew that this is the syllabus we have to study and remember, and exactly what to do to score high marks. But most of us struggled with it, we always studied right before the exam and still managed to score good marks. I don't know how, but I think that would be the biggest danger while applying for these universities, that even if otherwise you would have gotten through, if you planned and you worked on your application strategically, you got it drafted, you got it reviewed and redrafted, multiple drafts, and thought through, got feedback from people, spoke to coaches, and basically figure it out in a strategic way. I think anybody who will put in that effort will definitely have a head start. And I don't see even a lot of very talented people, very smart people with great profiles would not put in that much systematic work into the application process. And I think the biggest advantage anybody can have in the whole process is to be systematic, or to have somebody watch your back and kind of coach you through the whole thing, which is why I think your students have such a great success. So great. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think I have more clarity about the application process. I hope the others also have. So before we go, a quick round of feedback will be really appreciated. So I see 24 people are still in the session. If you can quickly share what are you taking away from the session, and what are your big takeaways from one or two major takeaways from this session.
And if you'd like us to release that Google document.
A Google document?
So, Google for questions.
Sorry, you're not audible because there's a problem on your side of internet.
I mean, if we can release a Google form for the questions.
To get, so we will also circulate. I don't know. There are webinar groups. Maybe there we can. Where else will we circulate? We can circulate somewhere. Let's see how we can circulate a Google survey which people may answer. So okay. Yeah, we can open it up to general public. So if anybody wants to apply. So not only the people who are a part of this session. So if you can share any points, 10 out of 10, 0 being terrible and 10 being very, very good, excellent, what would be your marks that you will give to us for this session in terms of scoring? So it kind of helps us to know whether we met your expectations or not, and how to improve next time. So any feedback would be highly welcome. Come on, don't be stingy with feedback. You sat here till all this long, and we spent so much time. The least we can expect from you is feedback. Okay, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. It was a great session beyond the high scoring. Okay, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Great. So those of you who are saying 8, 9, 7, if you can just quickly write also, you can also, I'll share my number, you can WhatsApp me as well as to where your expectations fell short and what would you like to ask to do better. Okay, raise volume. So you had a problem with the volume. Yeah, okay, we'll work on that. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, there's a Anirudh Agarwal. Thank ma'am for taking up the session. The session was quite informative. I got very much clarity about how I should go after the application, how to draft SOP, which college is good for which type of course, and would love to get in touch with you. Great, awesome. Okay, great. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to Shruti. If you have questions related to LLM, feel free to reach out to her. Great talking to all of you. Okay, there's still feedback coming in, so we'll keep an eye on that. Great, thanks everybody. I think that's it.
Maybe we can get rest of the feedback on LinkedIn. That will be helpful for.
Yeah, sure. We can try that. I'm not sure how that will work out, but we'll figure out.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day, guys. Happy lockdown. Stay at home, don't step out. Take care.